Hi, Charlie here as always. And what? I've been thinking, particularly for people that are coaches, and Joel's a coach, and Connie is a coach, and I'm a coach, and Rob, of course, is a coach. I think it's very important, at least in the style of coaching that I do, which is the only thing I know how to teach, really, is to keep in mind that the coaching conversations you're having with your clients, or it could even be with a friend of yours, um, they're not regular everyday conversations in my mind. And those of you that know me a little bit, you'll be able to tell already that I've slowed down. And I think slowing down is crucial. And I can tell you, at least all of the people that I wind up coaching, when they're discussing a problem or the fact that they don't have confidence in this and that, they almost always talk faster than they normally do. And I have a little theory, which definitely might not be true, but I think as human beings, most of us speed up our talking when we're talking about something that we're not enjoying talking about. I think we do that as a way of trying to run ahead of the feelings. That's just a theory of mine. But people almost always talk faster. And so I had developed maybe 20 years ago this exercise that I was calling breath talking. And I didn't even realize how important of an exercise it could be until about 15 years later. My friend Rob Schwartz said to me just in passing one day when I was talking to him, as I often do, you know, that breath talking exercise is, wow, it's one of the greatest things you ever created, Charlie. Keep it up. And he said, and one of the ways that I think about the breath talking exercise is it usually, not always, but usually turns people's conversation or reporting to me or whatever into something that sounds much more like prose. And I went to the beach on a really windy day. Pause, pause, pause. And the first thing I noticed was the seagulls were having trouble flying. Pause, pause, pause. And if I continued along this line, maybe I think I'd most likely come up with something, an image, an idea that's pretty interesting for the listener as well as for Charlie. But when someone's talking about the fact that they're not any good at leading a team or getting along with their wife or whatever, usually people are going bing, 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 bing. And just the rhythm that creates for any of the musicians out there in the world, it's a rhythm that's not pleasing. And so people are creating an unpleasant rhythm in a way that strengthens the emotional aspect of what they're talking about. So I took a nice long pause after I said that. And I spend a good deal of time teaching my clients how to slow down. And for many years, I have loved the phrase, the slower you go, the sooner you'll reach your destination. So we're not having everyday conversations. And I'll tell you, this week was unpleasantly challenging for me because a woman that I'm good friends with for the last 10 years here in Australia, she's an Australian, here in Chiang Rai. All of a sudden, because I was away in Japan, and all of a sudden I come back to Chiang Rai, and there's all of these messages from people that this lady was diagnosed all in one day with late-stage cancer and cirrhosis of the liver. And, you know, everybody, numerous people were immediately on me saying, Charlie, you've got to go see her. You've got to do some coaching with her. And I said, no, sorry. I can't be doing that. Number one, I'm pretty good for a number of years now at not attempting to coach people that haven't asked for coaching. And that can be a really tricky situation for coaches because it's very easy for most coaches to immediately say, oh, I could help her. And the thing is, you can't help her, him or her, unless they've actually asked for help. So you really need to know when to keep your mouth shut, as we say in New York City. Because if you attempt to coach someone that hasn't asked, it's usually inappropriate and doesn't work well. So I learned that again this week. And I'll tell you that the big plus for me, I didn't go and try to coach her. And I feel like I was sitting here in my chair and I felt like I had just taken a shower and I felt nice and clean and sparkling, you know, because I hadn't gone to the hospital and tried to coach this woman who I'm quite friendly with that hadn't asked for coaching. And I also got to see that in the last 10 or 12 days. I was in Japan with my daughter and her mom, who I get along really well with, and I stay at her mom's house, and we go out to eat dinner numerous times, and it's our no longer being married is much better, I think, than most people still being married. We get along well. And one of the things that I've noticed is So my wife is a lovely, or ex-wife. Depending on where I am, sometimes I call her my wife, because if I'm in a hospital or something, I don't want to confuse people about who this woman standing next to me is. So I just say my wife, and she'll say my husband. And what I've noticed for a number of years now is, so my wife is a very competent person in the sense of managing complex activities. Very, very world class, good at it. And that's not just me talking, she's won awards from her company and stuff, which is an international company, for being one of the very best people they had in their company. And I noticed she gets annoyed with me. I go like this, I'm one of those faces like, why? Because I'm not a well-organized person. And bless her soul, she has trouble even understanding that. Like she'll start telling me something about what we're going to be doing on Monday or something like that, and then she says to me with a bit of annoyance in her voice, "Charlie, why aren't you writing anything down? I'm going to have to tell you this again in another day." And I go, okay, sorry. And then I start writing it down. So I mean, we weren't arguing when we were together, but we broke up because it wasn't really working after a while. But I used to confuse her getting annoyed by me being disorganized as a much bigger part of her personality than it really is. She's a highly organized person that still really loves me after all these years and treats me very nicely and with respect. And she finds disorganization annoying. So this trip in particular to Japan, and I did do better at it. I did my best to become more organized. And I think that made our relationship a bit better. So those are a few things I wanted to say. And as always, usually when I start out, I didn't know I was going to say those things. But hopefully, I don't know, does anybody have a response to what I've just been saying? Or I could be boring everyone for the last 10 or 15 minutes. Yes, Connie.
So to me, it's a familiar dynamic in my own life. One person being more organized and the other person maybe more expression of creativity,
Yes, and go with the flow and
go with the flow and all that sort of thing.
yes, all that sort of baloney.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I mean, I'm a little embarrassed sometimes when it takes me, like I'm going to be 77 in a couple of days. How many? In 8 days, I'm going to be 77. It took me 77 years to start realizing some of this pretty basic human nature stuff. And like my wife, now I'm calling her my wife, which is okay. If there's a few books on the table from my daughter or whatever, she's just walking through the room. She stops and she tidies up the books on the desk. And I think while she's tidying up, she kind of notices what the topics of those books are. And then if 2 days later somebody like me, a bumbling kind of guy, comes along and says, "Hey, have you seen my book about canasta or something?" And she knows where it is. And I used to think, how does she know all this stuff? Because she's tidying up, she's organizing her life. You know, when my wife was a corporate salesperson, meaning she sold other corporate people, and she averaged selling 3 to 5 times more than on average all the other salespeople in her international company. 3 to 5 times more. My God, you know how much extra profit that made for her company? Back a few years ago, she sold $15 million in tickets. And the average salesperson, which is the company comes out with this number, not me, was selling, the average salesperson that they had was selling $3 to $5 million in tickets, and she was selling 15 million. Oh my goodness, that makes her company that much more likely to be profitable. And are you the organized one, Connie?
In some ways,
Oh,
different ways. He's an attorney,
okay.
so he reads thoroughly, and he can tell you what's in a document, the main points. After reading it once, he has it in a sense diagrammed in his mind, and he remembers the language. I scan and kind of get the feeling of it, but and I either respond positively or like blah or drop it away. But in our daily lives, he's not aware of the physical reality. He's very much in his brain, solving problems, and he does solve them very well. But yeah, so I'm the one who fixes things and puts things in the dishwasher because I'm the engineer. I'm the engineer, and he's the attorney.
Okay.
Different organizational.
Yes, and sometimes that can create tension in a relationship, and I think even more so, it creates tension within the one human being that's tracking his life a little bit. He or she is tracking their life.
Mm-hmm.
And like when we were together, my wife would say to me sometimes, with a little annoyance, not big time annoyance, "Charlie, I just don't understand why you buy all these things that you never use." And I said, okay, I got it. I'm looking at 3 things right now that I bought within the last year that I've never used. And I don't consider myself a big time consumer, unless it comes to buying fantastic clothing. But other than that, so I don't buy because I just need to consume and spend some more money. I see something and I go, oh my God, this could be so good for X. And in a moment of excitement, if it's not too expensive, I buy it. And then a lot of those things I never use. You know what? It is part of being creative. And I mean, when my wife asked me, why do you buy so many things that you don't use? Didn't just say to her, because I'm creative. That would be, no, that wouldn't be a good way to answer that question, that statement. So I asked in the email that I sent out to you guys, what is one challenge that you're facing that could make a big difference in your life if you solved it? And we're talking about who's the creative one, who's the organized one, and so forth and so on. So sometimes it's interesting when we consider ourselves having certain problems. I mean, I'm tempted to say, how can I start being less Charlie so that my life runs a bit more smoothly sometimes? But anyway, is there anyone here that would like to talk about a challenge they have that if they were able to triumph in regard to that challenge, their life would likely be more pleasing to them? And I do realize that people who study with me tend to be of a high quality and more together than the average person out there. So I could easily imagine that you guys studying with me right now might say, oh, nothing that I need to improve on in my life. It's all going great. And you could even make up something just so we'd have something to talk about.
Well, I have something, but I have dominated my issues have dominated before, and I would love to hear from some of the others too.
Yes, you know, it's true, Connie. I would, if someone just said to me, give me a quick synopsis of Connie, one of the things I would tend to say, if you don't mind, I'd say, you know, she's such a dominating woman. I felt I felt dominated the first class she came to. Uh, no one else, huh? Yeah, Rob.
Um, well, we're talking about organizing. I think I always think I could be more organized and more organized, more tidy. Um, I think I would like that. Uh, and it's something that's gotten better. It's taken a long time, but it could still be better, you know.
Okay, so good. Thank you for stepping up, by the way, and I really mean that. And so, because I have a long time background in NLP, um, I listened to what you just said, and the first thing I was thinking was that I call it language it. How could Rob language that a little differently? So one thing I happened to notice is you did do a little it,
I know you hate the it.
you know, it, and it was interesting the way you, I don't know the proper naming of this, you might know, the way you were talking about organizing. Yeah, made it sound to me almost like it was an entity unto itself.
Well, it is.
Yes. Okay. So I was in the right ballpark.
Yeah.
So what
And
is that?
it shares residence with me. and it probably dominates the residents
Yes.
or disorganization.
So, and I think, but of course, tell me your truth. When you said it's it's in resonance with me, it dominates me, that it really seemed to be appropriate for you at that time, right?
Yeah, or let's put it this way: I'm kind of doing my best to not sort of police that. I
To not just what, Rob?
to not. I'm not policing myself about the it. And I think I can share with other. I was talking to Charlie about this particular pattern of the it, and I'm still taking it in and seeing how I I I respond to that. So
Okay, cool. And I very truly appreciate that because it's easy for me to talk nonsense, maybe easier than the average person. So it's good if someone says, I'm going to have to sit with that for a while. Thank you very much for saying that, Charlie. So, the way it sounds to me, Rob, is that there's this thing called organizing, which is a verb, I think, that's somehow separate from Rob. There's Rob, and then there's this thing called organizing, is the way it sounds to me like you're explaining it. Is that at all correct?
yeah, that matches. It's almost like imagine if a treadmill could fit in my apartment, which it couldn't really. But there's this treadmill there, and some days I get on the treadmill, and some days it just sits there. And I think that's my experience of organizing. I have some things on the shelf behind me, and they're okay. However, I feel like if I spent some time with them, maybe I could find a more pleasing arrangement or find which things no longer need to be there. And this
Okay,
is the good part of the apartment.
so I think, and please correct me as necessary, I think the main piece, I'm not saying the only piece, the main piece I got out of what you just said is if I was better organized most of the time, I'd actually find that quite pleasing. And you're nodding your head yes for those that can't hear that. And so, isn't it interesting that there's a part of Rob that doesn't really want to please himself?
Yeah. Um, I think my relationship to this at times is uh like for example, when I visited this one friend of mine, her apartment's very nicely organized, and I really enjoyed that. And I used to go to the library here at NYU, and I really would enjoy being in that very pristine environment, and it would allow me to think very clearly. At least it felt that way.
So,
And
okay, go ahead.
and and then at times when I look at a pile of stuff, I don't always feel very capable to bring about that level of organization very easily. And I tend to get stumped on, well, do I want to keep this?
You
Do I want
tend
to
to
throw it
get
away?
stomped on?
I'll get stumped,
Stumped,
like I'll
oh,
sort
not
of
stomped.
stumped or perplexed.
About what?
Oh, do I want to keep this? Do I want to throw it away? Do I want to stick it in a box?
Okay.
And or I was trying to clean the tabs on my browser. I don't know if any of you have multiple tabs open,
Of course.
but you know, at least I know where the tabs are, the hundreds of tabs. But I'll go to a tab and I'll think, yeah, that's a really good video, and I'd like to come back to that video at some point. So maybe I won't close that tab right now. I'll come back to it later.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so it's that type of thinking process that I get caught in, and it's interesting because I talked to a friend of mine who's very organized, and she closes her tabs.
Sorry, but I
Like, wow,
find it a
yeah,
little
yeah,
hilarious.
beautiful tabs. They're all
Yes.
closed.
I went over to my friend's house and she had the best tabs I've seen in ages.
Exactly.
So, Rob,
Exactly.
isn't, maybe I'm missing it, and chances are I am. Seems like you're talking about being a human being in the 21st century.
Hmm.
And I think the only right answer about should I keep this tab or let it go.
Excuse me. I'm so sorry. There's a delivery being made right now. I need to answer the door. So the,
Okay, go ahead. So, and we have a recording. So, and where do we see, Joel? So I'm certain, I mean, you press recording, but how do I know we're recording? Where does it show me? And your sound is off.
Somewhere there probably should be a little red dot or something. It says
Oh, there's a
recording.
red circle with an X through it that says end.
You may need to, I don't know how wide your zoom is, your zoom screen is. So
My
somewhere,
who?
your zoom screen.
What do you mean you don't know? Oh, up into the
I don't
top of
know how wide you expanded it
recording.
out, so
Okay,
it might be
I
on
see
the,
it now.
okay.
I see it. Yes. You know, I think that YouTube, and I'm guessing this just happened on its own. YouTube created far and away the largest warren of rabbit holes on the entire planet, times 10. And I can't begin to tell you how many times I went to YouTube because I wanted to find out how to make sourdough bread or something. And I'm not a violent person, but I wound up watching a video about how to make a bomb. And I'm thinking to myself, I went on looking for a sourdough recipe. How in the world did I wind up watching a video about bomb making?
and now the FBI is going to visit all of us later today.
Yes, and now that I'm saying it, I've actually said that word 3 or 4 times,
Yeah, thanks.
which set off an algorithm. So yeah, Rob, I think so. When I'm listening to you talking, and I'm doing my best to pay attention. And
Me too.
well, it's not always, well, for me at least, it's not always easy to pay attention when people are talking about stuff.
Hmm.
Partially, for instance, at times, and I think this is really important to know as a coach, they're talking about something that doesn't exist in my world or exists in such a different way than it does in my world, that I'm actually having a bit of difficulty understanding what this person is talking about.
Hmm.
You know, because Rob, one thing I did want to talk to you about, by the way, when you do some coaching with me, is I keep on having all of these cupcakes and donuts left over that I don't wind up eating, and I wind up having to throw them away because they got stale. So maybe you could help me solve that problem one of these days. And I'm actually even having the ants in the neighborhood. So yeah, people are describing stuff like that, and I'm going, they have donuts and cupcakes laying around that they just can't seem to eat. And those people most likely weigh a few pounds less than me. So isn't there a thing about, and I'm asking, I'm not telling, isn't there a thing about how easy it is or difficult or easy is it for us to love and accept ourselves? And, you know, something I've noticed in the last couple of years, I think there's a lot of cheap mirrors being made in China or somewhere, because the mirrors that I see lately make me appear to be 20 or more pounds than I actually am. And I tell you really truthfully, there's times I could be in a mall, I could be anywhere, and I see myself over there and I go, oh my God, is that really you, Charlie? You really need to lose some weight. And then I actually have to like look away and look again just to make sure that it wasn't some unusual angle that I was looking at myself from. So how would you know that you were really well organized, Rob?
Um, I think I would say even a clearer idea of where things were when I go to look for them on my computer or on the bookshelf.
You'd
I
have
feel
a
pretty
better
good.
idea.
Yeah. And
Okay.
there's something about my environment that feels quite chaotic to me.
Okay.
And
Stop. Pause. How does that chaoticness relate to Rob? Can you say there's a part of Rob that feels rather chaotic at times?
sure, absolutely. There's a part
Good,
of
good,
Rob
good.
that
Yeah,
feels
good.
chaotic. Yeah.
Yeah,
And the apartment that he lives in. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
And as a human being, what do we do with that information? You know, because there's a term that we all know, OCD, which now that I said OCD, I can't remember. What?
Obsessive compulsive disorder.
Ob-
Obsessive compulsive
Obsessive,
disorder.
that's it. Obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yeah, my buddy called me that the other day.
Well, you see, I'm in the right ballpark again then. Like people that do things like go to visit somebody else in their house or apartment and they start tidying up the other person's apartment. Now,
I know a
frankly,
woman who did that, and she became a professional organizer.
okay,
Yeah,
and she could come visit me anytime she wanted.
yeah.
And one distinction I like to make so I can feel reasonably good about myself is I'm chaotic, but I'm not dirty.
Hmm.
Meaning my table's clean, but there's stuff all over it.
Hmm.
And my floor is clean, but what is my clothing doing on the floor? So I'm clean but chaotic. And I think that's something we're always looking to we're looking to feel comfortable with ourselves in the world. And particularly in the world today where for instance there's a lot of new media coming out in the world. I mean, so much of it is unbelievable. And somehow, about a month and a half ago, I signed up for 3 or 4 different, I'll call them platforms, whereas they're not newsletters as I know newsletters. And oh my God, I started getting 4, 5, 6 emails a day. Some of the stuff is like there's this quite brilliant guy. I don't know how to pronounce his last name properly. Maybe it's Reich, Robert Reich. He's a big time political operative for many years. Very clever guy. Happens to very much not respect or like Donald Trump. But I was getting at least 2 emails a day from him every day. He's not that good. No one is because I don't want to be following, I don't want to be making the US political scene my life. So just while I was away in Japan, I unsubscribed to 3 or 4 different newsletters. Was my form of tidying up.
Hmm.
And how could it be? Just, I want you to see if you can come up with this, Rob. How could there be a way that things change for you that, I don't know, in a couple of months' time, you're on one of these calls and you're complaining about really feeling over organized?
Over-organized. That's hilarious.
Excuse me?
I said, that's hilarious. As if that's possible.
I think I've been knowing you quite a lot in these last, call it 3 years or so. And I find you to be a highly competent person. And I'm willing to believe that you're so bloody competent that you could even be well organized.
Hmm.
Are you doubting that?
Yes and no, and I appreciate the kind words. Um, as you're talking, I realize I think there's certain places where I'm very organized, to the point where my friend said I'm OCD. And then there are other places where it's a bit out of control. The other thing that occurred to me is I think I have a backlog of stuff that I'm working through. It's like Connie gave us this beautiful goal of kind of putting our affairs in order so that other people don't have to do our dirty laundry, so to speak, which I just love that goal, Connie. And I think I have, years of crap that I'm working through to get things back on track. And with those years of things, it's a little bit hard to notice progress, but I
Yeah,
think progress is
you
being
know,
made.
Rob, and what if we thought about it a little bit more like, I'm learning how to play. I started taking up flamenco guitar a couple of years ago. And wow, it's interesting because I'm still very much not good at it.
Hmm.
But I find myself nicely enthusiastic. I could even call it a little bit driven at times to pick up the guitar and start practicing. I'm
Hmm.
still at a stage where I have to call it practicing more than playing,
Hmm.
because I'm going boom, 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 mistake, mistake, boom, boom, boom. But I really enjoy getting better
Hmm.
at the flamenco guitar. And I'm wondering what's the difference between me playing flamenco guitar and you getting better organized.
Well, it's a great analogy or comparison because I play guitar,
Yes?
and so I can relate to getting better at something in that respect, and and even enjoying the process.
Yes. So, in one domain, this is the way I understand it anyway, most likely wrong, but in one domain, you start off with an inquisitiveness, a creativity, and such, and then that's called guitar. And then in this other domain, you start off not really appreciating yourself, um, and in fact, making judgments about yourself.
Yeah, and I think some of that, Charlie, is because as a kid, uh, or over the years, when I would try to clean out my closet, I just couldn't make sense of it in any way, shape, or form.
Yes?
Um, and so my experience of organizing is almost always one where I go into feeling not competent or overwhelmed or, out of my
Yes.
league, so to
Yeah,
speak.
beautiful, beautiful. You see, I think this is exciting to me. And you might go, exciting? Really? Are you kidding me?
I'm glad.
It's that when I have clients come to me, and not just me, any of you out there doing coaching or even just helping other people, they invariably never really understand why they're feeling a sense of dissatisfaction or lack of respecting themselves or whatever, whatever, whatever. And that's how they're creating this problem for themselves.
Hmm.
So, what this is really reminding me of is even when I was a kid and I looked in my closet, which needed to be organized, I never had any idea of how to do it. And you're carrying that same, if you don't mind me saying, it might sound a bit strong. You're you're carrying that same negative self-appraisal with you today. And it's that negative self-appraisal that you need to tidy up, I would suggest, rather
Hmm.
than tidying up the books on your shelf and other stuff. So you've been looking to tidy up the wrong thing in a way.
Hmm.
And if you'll please sit with that for a moment or two. So I'm just wondering, Sherry, what are you taking? And I'm asking you this in a friendly manner. I'm not interrogating anyone today. Are you taking anything from this conversation that's interesting, useful, or and anything other than boring? Your volume, your audio is not on. Your audio is not on.
It's supposed to be on. I can see it's unmuted, but I can't hear her.
Ask to unmute.
You may have to
which-
go into her Zoom or computer settings.
Yeah, to pick a different microphone or
Pick it.
something, because it's right now you're muted, but before you were unmuted, and we still couldn't hear for
If
some
you go
reason.
into your settings, is your mic connected? Yeah. Is it because sometimes I know when I go to my mic, it actually shows my speakers are supposed to be using my mic, which is impossible, which
Yeah.
is why you would not hear my voice.
Try again.
No.
Oh,
Okay.
we
Sure, you can
I
also
hear-
got
go out
I
and come
heard
back.
yeah. I'm getting better at reading lips.
Okay, you
Could be a volume thing, and then again, you can.
you look a little bit. Go ahead, Joe.
I said could be a volume thing, so just check whether you have. Oh, and she might have stepped out and come back. There we go.
Okay.
So
Okay, so Connie, what if anything are you learning today?
You're on
And
mute.
that your volume is also off. I'm starting to learn something today. What the hell's going on with everyone's volume?
Connie, it's still muted.
Connie, you're muted.
Now, is it working?
Oh, it's back.
Oh, now
I
we don't
learned,
even care that Connie can't talk anymore. We'll get
I
back to
learned,
Connie again
I
in a
learned
moment.
that
So Sherry,
the trick is sign off and sign back in rather than try everything, because sometimes it's that easy. Reboot. Literally
Yes, reboot. When in doubt, reboot.
So
reboot.
what are you getting out of today? At least something, I hope.
Well, actually, it strikes home because if you saw my office right now, you would think it's very disorganized. Rob would not feel comfortable in my office right now at
Okay.
all. There's too
Okay.
much. It's too much. However, I already know that. So I'm comfortable with what I have. And at the same time, I feel very disorganized. And that's okay too. I accept myself in a way that I understand I have too much. And when I say too much, for the last 3-4 years, I have been doing a very good job of taking books out of the bookshelf and giving them away, taking them to the library, donating them, anything I can do. I'm not using them. I'm not reading them. They're just space holders. They meant something at one time. They have no meaning.
Yeah. I
They
can
have no
relate to
meaning.
that. Yeah, go ahead.
So once I recognize how emotions, and of course, I think we've all recognized that emotional attachment to either having something or being something. Having something are objects, stuff we have around us. Being something is who I really am. And it's okay if I'm struggling to be perfect, because perfect is not perfect. It's just an ideal in my head. I know that. But at the same time, I when something that isn't right, I'll just say, it's okay. It's okay. You're being a little hard. Step back from it, take a breath. Don't worry about it. Because in 5 years, if you're gone, nobody cares anyway. And that to me is something to always keep in mind. Nobody cares about what you care about. I care about it. It's my stuff. No one else will care about it. Let it go. That's this conversation just keeps bringing that up. So this conversation brings it up, and it's a constant reminder to be okay with where I am and who I am. And it's hard. I think it's really hard. Not just me, but I think a lot of us, we struggle.
Just let me, Sherry, I'm just wondering, just take a guess because you won't know for sure. Do you think Rob has a little difficulty with that?
Probably.
And how would you name it again?
Not sure. It's attempting. I think it feels like I want to be perfect because someone else is perfect. I can't be. I just can't do it. It's not in my DNA.
So
And
do
I
you
have.
mean like with Rob hanging out with me lately, it's actually making his life more difficult because he looks at me and he feels bad that he doesn't reach the same levels of accomplishment as me?
Well, certainly the same level of shirts.
And yes,
I gave up on
Again.
that. That I'm accepting.
I gotta say, the big, huge third eye staring at me from your shoulder has been a little
Yeah.
disconcerting.
Yeah. Yeah.
so I don't know where I came across this word within the last 10 days or so, but it's stuck in my head anyway, which is, and the term is existential loneliness. And what's been blowing my mind a little bit for a long time is like you see two people go out to a restaurant, even if it's like an expensive restaurant. So it's a bit of a big deal that they're in this place in the first place. Yes. And they're sitting opposite each other at the table and they're both on their phones. When I say on their phones, not talking to someone, but doing whatever, scrolling. And I can't help but wonder what kind of relationship do these two people have? I mean, maybe.
So
Go
I
ahead.
wonder if our grandparents, our parents or grandparents said about our generation, like, these kids, they're on these phones with these receivers with these curly cords, and it's like they're attached to the wall.
Yeah. Yes.
It must have been like that for them. When you think about it, like before phones, people weren't attached to the wall.
Well, I can remember being in my awkward teenage years and having some girl that I've been just beginning to find interest in, and she seems to be finding interest in me, and she calls me on the phone. Oh my God. Because my father really ran the whole household when he was home, you know? And you didn't do anything unless it was okay with him. And he's always at, what did you do that for? You know? So when Sally, my new maybe girlfriend, would call me up, then I was going to have to be questioned by him after she finally got off the phone. Nowadays, you know, I know in Japan, this is something that happens, maybe in America too. Guys have at least 2 cell phones. One and quite often they're married guys. They've got one cell phone that only one person has the number to, and that's their on the side girlfriend. And certainly their wife doesn't have that phone number. And then they have another phone that everybody has the phone number to. And what they do, this is the part that really blows my mind. They have these little tiny lockers in Japanese train stations that are really like this big. They keep their phone in that locker when they come home at the end of the day, whether it's right after work or whether they've been out drinking and maybe messing around with their girlfriend. That phone goes in the locker. And
So they don't make a mistake and leave it at home.
And oh no, they're not. Well, you know, too bad for them if they do, because. And then
Good thing I'm not organizing it.
The other beautiful part of this locker system is you get to put in a 4-digit number that locks the locker. So in other words, you don't have a key, because God forbid your wife would be doing your laundry and she would say, honey, what's this key for? And then you'd have to, I mean, of course you can make up an excuse, but better to not have the key in the first place. And you see guys coming home, if you're at any train station, as it gets past 6 o'clock, you'll see any number of people putting their phone in one of these little lock boxes. But at least they're organized. I mean, at least they can feel good about themselves.
I love it.
Well, Charlie, you know, going back to something you started with, I was just curious what the rhythm of organization looks like for Rob.
Okay, and give us an example or something. I don't know. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, is chaos? What is chaos? Is it noisy? Is it crowded? Is it is it an inconsistent rhythm? Is it, like, how does he define overwhelm? And again, we could even look at, since Rob plays the guitar, that's music is very organized.
Well, Joe, there's been
And
some
it leaves room for disorganization, right? You're talking about.
There's been some fascinating stuff written about, is there really anything actually chaos? Doesn't everything in the universe have a certain rhythm or complexity that someone can sort of figure out? And there's a certain repetition to it.
Yeah. So maybe it's a matter of
Joel, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
And Sherry as well. Yeah.
Rob, I think we all have standards. I look at it as a standard. And there are parts of my home that this is the way I like to keep it, and it's neat and tidy, and don't mess with it, because as soon as you do, it bothers me that it's messed up. And then there are other parts of my home that are a little freer, but here's what I came to realize. It is my fear that I can't find something. It is my fear. I won't remember. I can't. I do close tabs. I finally say that, hey, I don't need that anymore. But it is a fear that I can't find that tab again because it was so interesting.
Hmm.
And my fear of not, because my head doesn't organize in that way. I just can't remember things in that way. My son, on the other hand, I am so amazed by this man. I just go, holy cow, how do you do that? We'll be talking about something, and all of a sudden he says, boom, 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 boom. He has organized everything that I have said to him. We work together sometimes. And I just look at him and go, how do you, it's a wiring. We're wired so differently.
Hmm.
But my
I wonder
fear
if your
of
son's
losing,
name
yeah,
is your
my
son named Chat
fear,
GPT?
he's a whiz at that. He's very good at it. So my takeaway is really to keep reminding myself to let go. I
Hmm.
don't really need it. The rabbit hole, I don't need that. That doesn't
Hmm.
add anything to me. It's a momentary glimpse just to take me away from what I really need to focus on.
Hmm.
It's entertainment. It is, but it takes me away from what's important for me, because what's important is really important to me, and I don't put enough time in it. My
Hmm.
fear, I constantly keep looking at it and go, it's okay. There's a million Johnny Carsons out there. There's a million whatever. I don't listen to music, and the reason is I can't hear music very well. Anyway, that's a different story. I don't want to go
Hmm.
there. But I
Now
will
I've got
tell,
to now I've got to look for Johnny Carson. I was like,
and
oh wow,
I
that's a
don't
great
even want to
idea.
go there.
Yeah.
But those are the kinds of things that take me away from really what I feel is more interesting, more important. And I find myself getting something in my news feed, and I'll say, "Oh, I think everybody would like that." And I have to stop.
Hmm.
No, no.
Yes.
If they were interested, they would have it. They would talk to you about it. They would let you know. They have their own pieces of information that are important to them. But I want to share. Now that I do have a reason for talking. I want to share my ideas or my piece of news or something interesting that interests me with someone. And where do you find that person? It is rare. My husband, he's gone all day. In fact, he just came home a little while ago when you saw me leave. But he, we don't connect in that way. We just don't. We've been married 50 some plus years, so that's another whole story. But the other piece of that is people don't connect. Everybody wants to talk and tell their story. I find it's very hard for people to listen because we all want to share our own story, and there's no listeners.
Wow.
No
That's
listeners.
that's something that I hear that and it is like it blows my head apart because I have a lot of different experiences about that with myself, very much wanting to tell a story and not nearly as compliant when it comes to listening. And I'll tell you, I set a little task for myself this time in Japan that I actually was quite glad that, or proud that I set this task. I set the task of finding out in regard to my daughter and her mother something about them that I never knew before.
Hmm.
And I don't mean that my daughter happens to have a green pair of sneakers or something. What's the big deal? Why does it even matter? But something that is somehow of importance to my daughter and somehow something that's important to my wife. And it was turned out to be one of the greatest things I've done in a long time. And I got this idea from Robert Schwartz, actually. And particularly with my daughter, I have a really good relationship with my daughter. And she tells me a lot of different things, but it was the first time in our life together, me and her, really, that I got her to the place where she had enthusiasm about telling me something about something that she was enthusiastic about. Wow, such a great thing to do. And, you know, I think with our relationships with people, particularly if it's someone we're living with or could be a business partner that we have a lot of intense interactions with, I can't tell you how many times I've had people more or less tell me that they don't really care to talk to their husband or their wife or their business partner anymore. And oh my God, does that have to be an incredibly lonely place to be living? And yes, then there's people, well, I'd like to understand more about my wife, but I'm too busy talking about myself. That's something that Charlie's been able to say more than he'd like to admit. So I'm just wondering, sometimes people say to me, like it's really funny when all of a sudden somebody says to me, "Oh, you studied NLP? I never knew that." And then I have a chuckle because a lot of what I do has a basis in NLP. And I'm wondering, and please be honest, is this a meaningful class or did we just wander all over the place and I'm not sure where we went? Who'd like to answer, please?
I will answer. Yes. So I was amazed because Rob actually had a similar question or how it started as I had. And it's back to getting rid of my belongings. And there are several things that happen. One is it's not only the word it is also stuff is another word which does not really mean anything. And by disciplining ourselves to inquire when we find the word it in ourselves or in someone we're communicating with, to take a moment and ask them, as you did with us, what is it? In other words, get more detail, more feeling, more clarity, rather than skipping over it. And also the word thing is another one, which is not helpful because of the lack of specificity, to me
Yes.
anyway.
Yes. The lack of specificity. If I don't even specify what it is that I'm keeping around the house that I find a little problematic, oh, that's interesting. Stuff. Excuse me, what kind of stuff specifically? And if we look at what kind of stuff specifically, we most likely find something of importance to us, of value to us.
Yes. The other thing that I noticed today, I was thinking again about, occupies a lot of my thoughts about coaching, which is finding out what my clients were drawn to before they went to school.
Okay.
What
School meaning kindergarten.
school, yes, kindergarten or any kind of situation where they were coached to fit in. Now they're going to fit into their parents' world because they kind of have to somehow, but for survival. But when you go to school, then it's about behavior with the world more and how that affects them, that and the combination of that and the modeling of their parents. And in a way, we lose our purpose in life at that time. And I found it very helpful for myself and for my clients to recall, did they like to play in puddles and watch the water when it rains and where it runs? Or did they, were they taking care of baby birds that fell out of the net? You know, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. For myself, I learned to read officially. I learned to read before I went to school from hearing my parents read out loud to me a great deal, a simple, well-written text, but kids' text. But when I went to school, then I felt like I know how to read, and I would make little handouts, you know, like the ones the teacher had for the little kids in the neighborhood, and I would show them how to read. And so I know when I look back that I had this instinct to teach or to share.
Yeah, beautiful.
When I remember that, it gives me so much more authenticity and stability and competence and confidence when I am communicating with other people.
Yes.
And that's what I try and draw out of my clients. What was it that they loved before they were taught? They need to love this. You should do that. It's the should do's and the ought to's that destroy people's sense of purpose.
Yes. Or authenticity.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. And Joe, just in passing, and I do try to, we're running a little bit over already, but did you get something out of today other than,
No, I love listening to it all. I mean, you know, what Connie just brought up is great because I'm always asking what people are good at, hobby, job, whatever thing they enjoy doing, because that's hundreds of thousands of hours of A, something they enjoy doing, B, something they're successful at. So it means they have all these great adaptation strategies, right? Outcome strategies. And so often we can use those things to solve another problem, like with Rob. Rob's great at a guitar and music. So what happens if he thinks about organizing, you know, more musically with notes,
Yes.
space between notes or rhythms, and all those things can be a way to start to do things differently. So
yes.
and
And you know, by the way, we all know this, but I just, because it reminds me, due to part of what Rob was saying and what I know about him, I know people that are so judgmental that even though they really have a love for whether it's the guitar, the piano, it doesn't matter what instrument, they rarely practice because they get so frustrated with themselves that they're not good enough. And they can very much love hearing somebody else play the guitar, and they're not all that great at the guitar. And one of the reasons they're not all that great is they hate practicing because they always judge themselves. Interesting.
yeah,
So,
the part where we judge ourselves is one of the most detrimental things we do.
yes.
And
We
we're
do.
yeah, and we're often
We do.
measuring against either unknown standards or impossible standards.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, possible standards are interesting. Perfectionists are very unhappy people in general.
Yeah, but a lot of times we don't even know what we're measuring against, right? That's the
Yes.
other one.
Yes. Yes. Now you've lost your talking ability, Rob. You're okay.
I wanted to say thank you, and I wanted to say that I'm gonna have to go, or I'm
Okay.
gonna
I
choose
think
to
we all
go
should
because
go.
I need to cook. Yeah,
Okay.
and it's quite late. So
Okay.
thank you all very much. I appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Thanks,
everyone.
Rob.
And
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Rob.
please tell other people about the classes. We'd love to have a few more students coming. So thanks,
Okay.
everybody, and
All
hope
right.
to see you all in a couple of
2
weeks.
weeks?
2
2
weeks.
weeks?
Yeah.
2 weeks? Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
Charlie. It's really such a great experience
Okay.
explaining
Thank
to
you.
us.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing that. Thank you.